On this episode of America's Hope, we focus on the American miracle. America's Hope starts now. From the NTD Global Headquarters in New York, I'm Kelly Wright, and this is America's Hope. Thank you for joining us this hour. We're glad that you could. And wherever you are, we do hope that you're safe and well, taking care of yourself and your family because you matter. And what matters to many Americans is the very country that we live in. This nation we call the United States of America, a republic for the people, by the people, of the people. But how did it all begin? We're talking about that in this episode. The focus on the founding of America, which because of the claim of divine providence, many people are calling it the American miracle. And there's a movie coming out that depicts that. We're talking to the author of the book, The American Miracle, and we'll talk to the director and the producer of the film, The American Miracle. Let's get started. And welcome back to America's Hope. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Tim Mahoney, and he is the director and producer of a new film that's coming out in 2025. We'll give you a sneak peek of it through the trailer. It's called The American Miracle. It's based on a book that Michael Medved wrote under the same title, The American Miracle. And Tim, it's a pleasure to have you on America's Hope to talk about The American Miracle. What was it like to produce this and direct this film that is so refreshing and so good based on what I've seen thus far?
When I first thought about working on this, I thought, I don't know if I can do this. It's such a big undertaking, to do a period piece. This film starts with George Washington as a young man. So we had to do, battle scenes. They're called the Battle of Monongahela. And that was a big setup for anyone to do a film like that. And it had so many different characters, and there's probably 80 or 90 actors in the film and about 400 extras. So this is the biggest film I've ever worked on.
Wow. So it had to be exciting too. While it might be daunting, it had to be exciting for you to realize I am working on the largest film ever, and it really has a great message for the entire nation and world. Yes.
I think what's happened when I used to read Michael's book, The American Miracle, I had no idea that there were so many instances where God was actually acting in, or people would look at it and say, God must have been acting because these unusual events were happening that were favoring both the survival of George Washington as well as the birth of a nation. And that's what this film is going to be able to show. We've got tremendous stories of supernatural intervention of weather that would prevent attacks from the British or allow Washington and the Continental Army to escape. Those are just some of the scenes that we show in this film.
What were you trying to capture from a directorial aspect? Because I know directors have their own way of viewing the film and actually bringing things to life for people in the audience to really take away from this. Wow, I didn't see it that way, didn't know it that way.
What's interesting is it's about leadership. And I think I had worked earlier in a series of films called Patterns of Evidence, and I had worked on the Exodus and the story of Moses and his life. And many people have seen the American independence similar to the biblical Exodus. In fact, I think Benjamin Franklin had suggested that the national seal was going to be the Israelites going through the sea, being delivered from their in bondage. And I think that the leadership of George Washington literally at times brought me to tears. How he had to depend upon and be somewhat the courageous man that held this together. And George Washington, I believe, had in his life that was at the Battle of Monongahela. They were trying to they shot all the officers And Washington actually had 4 bullet holes through his coat. His hat was shot off, and 2 horses were shot, but they
Wow.
could not kill him. And later on, there was a prophecy that was given by a Native American chief. So he is the Moses of America, and he really led this nation. And I focused on his life in the making of this film.
I've got to dig down into a little bit more. You said that a prophetic word was said over him by a Native American chief. What was that prophetic word, and what does that say about the involvement of Native Americans in developing this nation?
Well, this happened at a time when Washington, I think it was about 6 years before the American Revolution, he was out surveying with a group of people. And during that surveying time, one of these, the chief had heard that he was going to be in the area, and he had a word for him. So he came with a group, and he didn't want to eat anything. He just wanted to share his heart. And he said they tried to shoot him. Rifles that never missed could not hit him. And they realized that the word was that he was protected and that he was going to be a leader of a great nation. And I think, asking the question, what does that mean? I think what we realize is that God, the Creator God, created all of us. And in later on, we realized that liberty and justice for all. Now, we have some great scholars in this film. Robert George from Princeton really articulates what this liberty was, and that we were made in the image of God. And he references Genesis chapter 1 in this film, and he says they realized that all men were created equal, and that there was a law higher than man's law, and it was God's law. And that's what this film is bringing out. And I think that a lot of people have forgotten or have never been told some of this history that we have, and that's what this film is going to be bringing to them.
Wow, Tim, I like the way you've described that, because I think it's exactly what Americans need to hear and reflect on, because in our current modern era, we have drifted so far away from that, and not knowing that God is there in the details and in the very fabric of American society, those Judeo-Christian principles that some people are denouncing today. What do you think this film will mean to viewers who come in and may not even know their own history?
Well, when I was working on it, I could see that there were 3 parts to it. One was the early life of Washington. The second was the war. And the third part of this was the founders coming together with the Constitution. And I think what a viewer will take away from this is that God has, I think there's enough case to be made that God has supernaturally allowed this nation to come into being. But not only that, but there's a supernatural, in a sense, a divine inspiration in how the government was set up. And it was a covenantal government. And I think the word federal is Latin for covenant. And what's interesting about that is that they understood that there was a God, and that we were fallen, sinful people. And that's why they developed a separation of powers. And once again, Robert George does an amazing job of explaining this. Because of our sinful nature, no one can have absolute power. And I think that's one of the challenges that I didn't realize was happening currently, is that these powers that need to stay separated were separated, and that was really divinely inspired. And then this Constitution, it constitutes us. In other words, it's the agreement that holds all people from different races, different economics, different religions together. That's why it's so important. And I think this film, for me, once I got into that latter part of the film, I realized I feel like I had to ask for forgiveness for not knowing this. And now that I know it, I need to champion it. And that's what I'm hoping will happen, is that people will realize what they've been given. It's really, in some ways, it's a gift. That's why people from all over the world want to be here. And it's the divine inspiration of it all. And I think that that's why this is so important, because on the verge of forgetting it and possibly losing it. And that's why I think this film is so timely.